Pro days continue across the country. Here's a look at the notable schedule for this week. LSU and Jayden Daniels will hold one on Wednesday. North Carolina and Washington will hold theirs on Thursday. As fellow quarterbacks Drake Maye and Michael Penix Jr. are going to showcase their skills to talent evaluators. And for Penix, it'll be the second go-around. Of course, he did participate in the combine. All right, we're ready to talk about the NFL draft. We've got Brady Quinn on set, and we also have our draft analyst Ryan Wilson joining us. And Road was going to be on the road this week, and we'll start with LSU and Jayden Daniels. Ryan, what interests you the most about what you're about to see there middle of the week?
So we'll see what Jayden Daniels weighs if he steps on the scale. That'll be interesting. He's lighter framed than the comparison we make in terms of Lamar Jackson, but he's every bit as athletic, and he has a big arm, and we saw all that unfold during the course of the season where no player did more to help himself in 2023 than Jayden Daniels. And in terms of his teammates, it'll be interesting to see if wide receiver Malik Nabers runs, and if he hits a sub 4.4, which most people think he will, how does that conversation affect Marvin Harrison Jr. going first over as the first wide receiver versus Malik Nabers? But people are going to be there to see primarily Jayden Daniels, especially those teams picking in the top 2 or 3, because after that you're going to have to trade up a lot to go get him. And again, I want to see what he weighs. I want to see what he looks like in person outside of just talking to him at the combine, and just see him throw in person, because last year we saw Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Will Levis, back to back, and that gives you a sense of what these players look like when you're trying to compare them at the end of the day, when you're trying to figure out where they end up getting drafted once April 25th gets here.
This is really one of the last opportunities that Jayden Daniels has to make a case for himself for being the top quarterback taken. He did as much as you can possibly do his last season at LSU, winning the Heisman Trophy. And Ryan touched on it. He's probably the most improved quarterback of this entire draft class. So I think his ceiling is still rising. I don't think we've gotten there yet as a complete player. The one thing I would say, though, in regards to this particular pro day that makes it a little bit tough is when you have 2 other players who are looked at as first-round talents, and Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr., sometimes those guys tend to steal the show a little bit. So especially if Nabers ends up running that fast 40, they make a couple of great grabs for you, all of a sudden the narrative shifts from, is it so much about Jayden Daniels? Is it maybe more about Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas, how those guys look?
Yeah, so let's talk about those guys, Ryan. Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr. I want to circle back to something that you said about Malik Nabers. Hey, if he runs a sub 4.4, maybe he's in the conversation above Marvin Harrison, and these are both guys. And I feel like Malik Nabers, Ryan, after seeing all of your mocks, it is somebody whose draft stock has just been on the rise these last couple of weeks.
I would imagine Brady would love to throw to Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Nabers or Brian Thomas Jr., but we talked to Malik Nabers at the combine, and he said he's faster than Jayden Daniels and Brian Thomas Jr. Jayden and Brian said they're the fastest, so that gives you some idea what kind of speed we're talking about. The other thing I'll say about this, and Marvin Harrison Jr. got some pushback for not working out at Ohio State's Pro Day last week, and Brady hinted at this a moment ago. Last year watching C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith-Njigba, guess who stole the show? Marvin Harrison Jr. when he ran routes for C.J. Stroud. So you can go back and watch last year's tape to get a sense of who he is at that pro day. But I think Malik Nabers, Brady will ask you, if he runs a 4.33, which is the same as Brian Thomas Jr. did at the combine, who's your wide receiver 1 as we go into the draft?
I think that's the hard thing for me in answering that question is I'm somebody who's really high on Malik Nabers. And I had an opportunity to see Marvin Harrison Jr. a number of times this season, and it's kind of 1A, 1B to me. I think the one thing that I love about Malik Nabers when I watch him play is he just has a little more wiggle to his game when you watch him run routes, when you watch the way he's able to separate. And I think he's the type of wide receiver that at the next level maybe even continues to excel as far as what we see him do. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., again, has that perennial Pro Bowl caliber type player, but there's something about Nabers' game that makes me a little bit more attractive to what I think he's going to be able to do at the next level, too. So if he runs that 4.33, I don't know. I think I might be a little bit persuaded maybe to look that direction, or be okay if I'm one of those teams. If I see Marvin Harrison Jr. go off the board early, I feel okay about that, knowing I'm getting a heck of a play in Nabers.
It is a deep and competitive draft class in terms of the wide receivers. But again, getting back to the quarterbacks, you're going to be at LSU this week, Ryan. You'll also be at North Carolina. So when it comes to Drake Maye, what are we going to be talking about later this week?
That's right, Tommy. We'll fire up the old with the first pick RV and drive from Baton Rouge to Chapel Hill overnight. And hopefully Rick drinks enough coffee because he's not a great driver. But once you get to Chapel Hill, you want to see Drake Maye do a lot of the same things that you saw Jayden Daniels do at his pro day, hopefully on Wednesday, because neither of those players threw at the combine. So you'll get a chance to see Drake Maye up close and personal, throw to his receivers. Tez Walker, who you just see caught the touchdown there, he'll be working out as well. He has 4.3 speed. And the questions are going to be the same. He's a really good athlete. The tape, obviously, in 2023 isn't as good as the 2022 tape, and Brady talked with me and Rick about that on the podcast when we went through these quarterbacks. Jayden's tape was A+. This was probably B-, and there are reasons for that. But again, when you see these players in person, you get a sense for how big they are, how they move in the pocket, even though it's against air, and what their arm looks like in person, because sometimes it's hard to tell when you're watching on television whether a guy has a 98-mile-an-hour fastball or a 92-mile-an-hour fastball. I think Drake's going to be closer to 98 than 92, but I'll report back on Thursday and let you know.
You know, all these quarterbacks are capable of being franchise quarterbacks at the next level. We talked about one of the concerns with Jayden Daniels might be his weight. That's something that Ryan's going to be keeping an eye on. That's not going to be a concern with Drake Maye. He's got the prototypical size and even athleticism that you're looking for. For him, it's going to be about hitting all the throws. I mean, this is a scripted workout. As Ryan touched on, he didn't work out at the combine. So this is one of his last opportunities to kind of showcase his accuracy consistently throughout the course of the scripted workout that he does, but also the arm strength and everything else that's going to be on display here for him. So because of the tape wasn't quite as good, I think he's looking to make up a little bit of ground, I think, in some of the minds of the talent evaluators in selecting between quarterbacks. Because if you're Washington at 2 overall or New England at number 3 overall, I would imagine you've got these quarterbacks kind of bunched together based on how they performed over the past couple of seasons or just this past season. So little workouts like this, how they look in person, how that ball's being driven to the outside on out-breaking routes, all of those things are going to make the difference in what a team feels about you leaving from this workout.
I think you brought up an interesting thing, Brady. I want to ping it back to you about Drake Maye, because you mentioned this year's tape might be not as good as 2 years ago. And right now, Ryan Wilson has him going 3rd overall to the Patriots. It's not about him going to the Patriots. It's just more about the talent evaluation process. Yeah. Sometimes when you get a Jayden Daniels who is early, late, maybe with Drake Maye, it's early, late in terms of the tape that you like from the year before. How do you, as a talent evaluator, look at that from Maye specifically?
I think the toughest thing to break down between Jayden Daniels and Drake Maye as you compare the two is one has 2 guys who may go in the 1st round of wide receiver, and the other one doesn't have anything close to that. I think that was part of the problem, too, at UNC this past year, as he was playing games where he had to make up for a defense that was giving up a lot of production, a lot of points, and he didn't have the type of talent to throw to like what you see at LSU. So how do you go about breaking that down? We've had those conversations in the past where people almost, tried to knock down C.J. Stroud because he's throwing to guys who are going to be 1st-round picks in the NFL at Ohio State at wide receiver. Then meanwhile, you go, well, the ball's on the money. What does it matter? So I think that's the toughest thing is how much do you take away from the production of what you saw in Jayden Daniels, knowing that he's probably going to a team that doesn't have that type of talent at wide receiver out around him, at least not initially. That's one of the reasons why the team's drafting so high. So it's going to be hard for those talent evaluators because they're really just guessing at this point. And they're saying, like, I have a feeling about this guy. When he gets on our team, he's going to be able to sell under these circumstances. And that's really the guessing game of this entire thing.
And Ryan, before we move on from UNC, of course, Drake Maye, that is a big name there. But what other athletes are you going to be looking out for there at their pro day?
Yeah, Jack, one other thing quickly about Drake Maye. He was behind Sam Howell, so he's only played a few seasons, where Jayden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., they played 5 full seasons of football, so they've had more opportunity to grow, and that's something else to keep in mind as to the evaluation process. In terms of other people to keep an eye on at the USC Pro Day, Tez Walker, who wasn't able to play early in the season because of NCAA violations, came out, and he's an absolute deep threat. He struggled at the Senior Bowl in terms of drop passes, but he will measurably, he checks every box, and as I mentioned, he can catch deep balls all day long. And then Cedric Gray, I'll mention as a linebacker who has a chance to be a late day 2, early day 3 pick, who also tested pretty well, sideline to sideline type player. And if he works out on Thursday, I'm sure he will check some boxes that teams will be looking for as we talk about the off-ball linebacker position.
And sticking with the quarterbacks, Michael Penix Jr. had a great combine, impressed a lot of people. So, Brady, when he's throwing at Washington's Pro Day, what else do you want to see from Michael Penix?
I mean, that's the thing, consistency. I mean, we see it on tape. He's got probably the next best tape to Jayden Daniels. We'll keep repeating that. But there's not really much more he can showcase at this point in time. Maybe a little bit more of the athleticism. Some people have this knock on him that he's not that great of an athlete. I'm like, go back to his days at Indiana. He can move around in the pocket. He can move around outside of the pocket. Some of the injuries have maybe prevented him from wanting to showcase his athleticism more so, but maybe that's the only thing at this point he's really got to show. But to me, he's already put it all out there. He's done everything he can possibly do to set himself up to be drafted as one of the top quarterbacks in this year's draft.
That's exactly it. Like, what else does he need to do? And people point to the Michigan game, the last game of his career, the national title game, as being a reason to be concerned about Michael Penix Jr. I would ask you to find a quarterback who dominated against that Michigan defense, because those guys are going to have 10 guys that end up getting drafted. Go back to the Texas game that we're watching highlights up here. No one had any issues with Michael Penix Jr. then or at any point during the fall in 2023. And he has a couple years of really good tape. And maybe you can say, well, he went to the Senior Bowl and didn't set it on fire. Spencer Rattler was the best quarterback there. He didn't hurt himself. Bo Nix was sort of average that week as well. But I give both those young men credit for throwing at the combine along with Spencer Rattler, and I think he's going to end up being a first-round pick. I know there are injury concerns, but if the storyline is, okay, how's the tape? Well, Michael Penix Jr.'s tape's pretty freaking good, so I think if we go off of that, there's no reason he shouldn't be a first-round pick.
There is a conversation to be had, and the betting markets are asking whether we're going to get 5 or more quarterbacks in the first round. Michael Penix in that conversation, aside from that top tier of 3 with Williams, Maye, and Daniels. In Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft, he has Michael Penix going to the Raiders, but there were early mocks that Ryan had actually going to the Raiders with their first-round pick there at 12. But, Brady, what do you think about Vegas? They have Gardner Minshew in the offseason coming into town, but Michael Penix Jr. out there in the desert.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, clearly it's a need. You've heard Antonio Pierce talk about Aidan O'Connell earning the right to compete for the job, but he's not going to be viewed as their #1 quarterback going into the season. They need to find one. They're going to find one most likely in the draft. And to Ryan's point, in this mock draft, you could see that scenario playing out where a team like the Las Vegas Raiders, who could trade up into the back end, they want to get him under that 5th-year option or have that 5-year contract for the quarterback to give him a little bit more time to see how things progress and how he's evaluated over a 5-year period as opposed to 4. So it would make a lot of sense from that standpoint. I think it's going to be really tight because of the medical evaluations. That's the one thing you hear time and time again. So if indeed that does happen where you see a team trade up and take Michael Penix in the back of the first round, clearly they feel good about his medical.
All right, and Ryan Wilson, before we let you go, you have something for Brady Quinn for us before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I checked on the old internet machines to see if there's any footage of Brady Quinn back in March of 2007. 17 years ago, Brady had his pro day. Look at this guy.
Yeah, I've got my Kentucky basketball shorts on, at least like Kentucky blue. Guess what? Didn't work out well for my bracket. I'll tell you that much.
Brady, I like the hair. It's like
that was like two-a-days hair.
You got going on there.
Right?
Yeah, we always have the flow bucket on the back of the helmet. So.
By the way, we've all participated in pro days. You're the only one that did it. Go ahead, Ryan.
Is it true that you caught passes, or Marcus Freeman caught passes from you that day?
No. The Marcus Freeman that you're thinking of was the tight end for us, not the head coach now, who was at Ohio State. Marcus Freeman, who's now back in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But that was one of my tight ends during my time there. So that Marcus Freeman caught passes for me.
Clearing the air. Ryan
That's
Wilson,
what I meant.
We appreciated Brady Quinn getting us pumped for those pro days as they continue. And, of course, as you heard Ryan talk about him and Rick Spielman, they are going to UNC and LSU's pro days. We'll have to circle back with Ryan on Rick's driving skills and see if they've improved this go-around. You can catch him on the
insurance
with the First Pick podcast. Download and listen wherever you get your pods, or you can scan that QR code.